So before we dive in, I would like to welcome Greg King, the CEO and the founder of the RegShares. So for those the people in the audience who might not be familiar with the RegShares, would you like to give us a brief intro for yourself and then tell us a little bit about the RegShares?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My first time in Seoul. Really enjoying the visit so far. RegShares is a U.S.-based issuer of alternative strategy ETFs. We manage over 50 ETFs, and we specialize in alternative themes such as high income, leverage, thematic, and crypto. I personally have had an interest in crypto for over 12 years, and finally in the United States, after many years of toil, we are able to issue crypto ETFs, so I'm delighted to be here to talk about the altcoin wave.
Thank you. So, and I also want to introduce a little bit about Jito because actually we are pretty relevant to today's topic. So Jito is a core infrastructure provider building on Solana, and then we operate Jito Sol, which is liquid staking token or LST. And then I cannot cover too much detail about what the LST is, but LST is essentially a tokenized representation of the staked assets. So usually without LST, when the user stake their asset, they will get a yield, but those assets will be locked up for that staking period. But on the other hand, if you use LST, the user will receive the liquid token in return, which represents the value of the staked asset. So the user can still have a exposure to staking yield, and at the same time they can have the liquidity on their hands. So if I use kind of analogy, it can be just considered as similar to transferable certificate of deposit. So it's kind of giving some evidence of their ownership. So we pretty believe that even investor needs some able to have access to staking yield even within the ETF structure. So Jito is already being used as an underlying asset for several ETF products over the Europe and the US. And then actually the RegShares is the kind of first one used the Jito in the first Solana staking ETF in the US. So I'm really grateful for that kind of gesture. Okay. So with that context, I would like to start with the first question, which is why do you think now is the right time to seriously explore altcoin ETFs? Is this simply a continuation of the Bitcoin ETF story or something fundamentally different?
I think it's a continuation of an access story. You know, ETFs are a convenience vehicle, and if you take a step back, you know, obviously we can buy crypto on a native basis, and yet globally there's a push for ETFs. So why is that happening? I think there are several reasons. One, obviously most of the wealth that's been accumulated by retail investors and institutions is not held in wallets, you know, the crypto native ecosystem. It's held in brokerage accounts and managed by advisors, etc. And so ETFs, I think, just continue to deliver what they've always tried to deliver, which is convenience and a wrapper that it can be taken anywhere your money can be taken. So yes, it's an extension of what's happened with the Bitcoin ETFs. However, with altcoins, and that's a broad term, and we're covering a lot of ground when we use that term. It doesn't apply to everything, but we all know that Bitcoin is a proof of work system. Most of the altcoin world is a proof of stake system. And so what that has introduced to the ecosystem of investors in crypto ETFs is the possibility for a yield on their investment, which gives an extra incentive for investors to consider these products.
So yeah, as you just said, many investors can already buy and hold crypto directly. So from your perspective, why does access to an ETF still matter? So you just mentioned there's a lot of things that we need to consider to start investing in crypto, setting up the wallet. Mm-hmm. And then it's really happened to my parents and then my friends as well, who are new to the crypto sector. So I had to explain you need to create account the exchanges first, but it's not hard. But actually, I end up with just explaining how to set up the personal account and then how to preserve your private key and everything.
Yeah.
And then I think it's even more like serious to the institutional investors. So have
Yeah.
you think about any?
Well, there's so many ways to think about that question. I mean, when you're talking about this and saying it's not hard, yet it's difficult. You know what I think of is I think of the iPhone. You know, I used to
2008?
have a BlackBerry. You know, back in the day, and I love my BlackBerry. And then iPhone came out, and it was weird because it had one button.
Okay.
You remember? Just one button, and now it doesn't even have any buttons. Just have a screen. So the world wants convenience. The world wants ease, and even just setting up a wallet, maybe it's simple, 3 steps, whatever. There's so many people that just won't do it, or if they do it, they'll forget about it. Whereas the brokerage account, clicking to buy an ETF, and then understanding that someone else is taking care of custody, staking, you're not going to lose it, etc. It's some of the criticisms for example, with Bitcoin maxis is that not your keys, not your crypto, but there are a lot of people who want exposure to the price movement and the diversification in their portfolio, and they don't necessarily consider that a meaningful risk. So to further answer your question, why ETFs? I think there's a couple factors that really incentivize the creation of these products, and it centers around who's managing your money. A lot of retail investors increasingly are managing their own money, but there's still a huge amount of wealth that is being held under advisement by an advisor. Those advisors have no visibility into their customer's crypto wallet, typically. And so there's 2 important things that flow from that. One is they can't manage the risk in their client portfolio. They don't know exactly what's going on. And number 2, which is very important to these people, is they can't take a fee on the crypto. So including in the portfolio along stocks, bonds, etc., by holding in an ETF is a very helpful thing for some people. Not everybody. The younger generations don't need this as much, but the older generations and the institutions value this convenience.
So since you mentioned about the smartphone, like we often like try to compare this crypto, the wave to like internet or like smartphone, and then actually like the back then adoption was really fast. Like you can see everyone's using smartphone in 1 year, but like actually, unfortunately for the crypto case, it taking like 10 years right now. So
Yeah.
I believe like maybe the kind of benefit might be not as big as we expected, but like is kind of a lot of benefits coming from the crypto. Like people still don't know yet about it, but like I think ETFs can be the one like people can learn about the crypto more, and then they just give a more easier way to access the kind of new world they are not really used to it before.
Yeah, it's true. As whenever we prepare an ETF, we have a big educational campaign about the ETF itself, but most importantly, the underlying crypto. So it helps build the ecosystem.
So like let's go a little deeper about the question. So from an like ETF issuer's perspective, like can altcoin ETFs offer meaningful active management value beyond just direct investing?
Yeah. So when you say active management, that to me that implies someone who's trading the portfolio.
Not just trading portfolio is more like just compared to just holding and then investing directly in the exchanges. And then like the user can decide they want to stake it or not, and then they may want to stake in the certain validator, or they are looking for a certain yield, and then ETF issuers may have some kind of they make kind of investment decision on that. So
Right. Yeah. So I think you're talking about almost 2 layers of investment decision. It's if we take the case of holding Solana, for example, you're asking about if a user is holding it directly, they have to decide to stake. When they receive the rewards, maybe they have to restake those rewards. There's some maintenance. It's like dividends and dividend reinvestment. Yeah. So the ETF does provide basically convenient packages it's sort of full service, where ETFs are being managed, the assets are safely custodied. There's a diverse set of staking providers that are selected, and it makes it easier. You know, back to my iPhone point, it just makes it easier for investors.
Because there's a reason like the ETF should getting a fee from the investor anyway.
Yeah, you have to do something to earn your fee, you know. So this is a convenient package for many investors, and you know, in the case of our fund on the Solana, they're receiving a monthly dividend check into the account, and they don't really have to do anything.
Like I mentioned about there's can be some active management component in the altcoin ETF, but the most of the like crypto ETFs are pretty much like tracking the market price. They are pretty much passive, and then I figure there are a lot of the like covered call ETF and then a lot of creative like product on your lineups. And then, do you see that like we can expect that kind of the covered call or structured product using the crypto asset in the future?
Yes, definitely. So we do have covered call funds in our lineup, not currently on crypto, just the stocks, tech stocks mainly. But in the U.S., you're already seeing covered calls, covered call funds being filed for on crypto. The biggest news was BlackRock filing this, and you've had actually leveraged exposures already. Will we see more beyond that? Yes, yes. So we are considering some additional permutations on those themes, but nothing public yet. So.
Okay, it's great to be here to listen to your kind of plan later.
Yeah, but I'm not telling you.
Okay.
But we hope to file some interesting strategies with crypto.
Yeah, and then like we are talking about the altcoin ETF, and then like but mostly even in Korea, like there's not even a Bitcoin ETF yet here, but like we are just kind of preemptively discussing about this altcoin, and then as you know, there are like 100,000 of the altcoins out there, and then like obviously everyone cannot be eligible for ETF, and then like how do you draw the line among them, and then do you have any kind of criteria like which tokens can be eligible for ETF product?
Yeah, we have a number of criteria that we use. You know, we have a research team that does analysis on what the protocol is and what it's trying to accomplish, its position in the ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. But even if we want to, let's say we like a certain token and we want to launch an ETF, it's not just us. There have to be other service providers in the industry who also approve and are using that token. For example, the main one is a custodian. So in the US, there's some pretty strict rules around which entities can custody crypto, banks and trust companies. And you know, there are a number of custodians, but not a lot. There's really, you know, 4 or 5 of the big guys that are eligible to use. And if they're not supporting a certain token, then we can't launch a product.
So yeah, I mean that's so true. And then like there are a lot of things the JITO need to like went over to be like handled in the ETF product. So like as you said, like JIT also need to be listed in the not listed like handled by the custodians, and then
Yeah.
like we also need kind of price index for like JITO Sol. So to do that, like we had to list it like not JITO or JITO Sol in the like different like crypto exchanges across like global, and then so we are integrated to the Anchorage Digital and the BitGo for now, and then we are also talking to them that so like people can post the JITOS as a collateral. So, but it's not just like JITO's case, but it should be done by all the other altcoin as well to be dealt in the ETF.
Yeah, it's like you have to run a marathon before you can get started.
So like one of the things we are confronting, like example, like one of the things like JITO is confronting is, so we had to talk to like SEC, like IRS, because like there's a lot of the things that can be considered a tax event, and then we also need to talk about the accounting measure, because like crypto asset is often considered to be the intangible asset, and then intangible asset is evaluated at purchasing cost or the market valuation. However, like because due to its the intangible asset, it cannot be write off. The value of the like, in accounting only rise up, so it may just create some like complication to the ETF issuers or the asset manager as well. And then, like for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, they are intangible asset, but like they also considered to be as a marketable asset because like they might be traded in the like CME future exchanges, and then they also trade in the other listed exchanges. So I think like even though like there are a lot of the institution want to list many altcoins, there are a lot of like steps we need to go over, and then we also need to convince many entities regarding those.
Yeah, that's correct. The main one again is from the U.S. perspective is custody, but we also need to make sure that the ETF will trade properly, and that involves market makers. So if you have a custodian, well, you still need a market maker, and those guys are actually, in a lot of cases, take a step back. Market making for ETFs, for the audience benefit, is what keeps the price in line, because otherwise there's an arbitrage. If the let's say ETF holds one Solana token and it's trading, Solana is at $100 and the ETF is at $101, then you can sell the ETF and buy the Solana and capture the spread. So the market making community is important because they perform that service, and the end client result is you have a product that tracks well. But the ETF market making community has developed over the last 30 years, and it's pretty much TradFi, traditional finance companies. So when the crypto ETFs hit, they don't know how to do this because they're not trading the crypto. Whereas on the other side, you have crypto market makers that have developed over the last, say, 10 years, but they don't trade ETFs. You know, they just have, they're trading native crypto. They may not even be in the traditional finance system.
Totally segregated environment, basically.
Totally segregated environment, yeah. And so the market makers that we need to talk to is, with the Venn diagram, is the overlap, right? Those are the only guys that work for us.
Do you have any kind of example you can mention?
Jane Street is
Jane
a good
Street.
example. They do both. You know, there's some other firms as well, but they're not nearly as many as on the crypto side or on the pure ETF side. So let's say there's an altcoin, we like it. We have to convince a custodian to custody it. We have to convince a market maker to trade it.
So I remember there used to be several like TradFi who are dealing with the crypto, like Jump Trading and the Jane Street, and then I remember they just kind of downsizing their business back in 2023 because due to like back then the regulatory is a lot harsher than right now. So I expect or hope they're just expanding their business again back to on top to supporting all the institutions. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a specific comment on them in particular, but you know, the market making is about profit making. And if there's volume, if there's investor interest, and they can do it, their compliance and legal people let them do it, they will do it. So it's really driven by investor demand. However, you know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem because, you know, it may not be easy to convince them that there will be demand because the demand can't be demonstrated until there's an ETF. So sometimes we're having those types of discussions.
So like actually next question is connect to the like last year comment. So altcoins are known for the high volatility, and then is that level of volatility compatible with an ETF structure? Like does it create meaningful challenges in operation and management? And then not just volatility, is like whole mechanisms happening in the like segregated environment, like on chain.
I don't think the volatility in crypto is particularly problematic for the ETF structure. I mean, remember that the ETF structure handles 3 times leveraged exposures on tech stocks. That has more volatility than a lot of crypto. So it's really not that big of an issue. I think it's more of a client perception. The recent volatility, for example, is, you know, we just opened up crypto ETFs in the last year or two. A lot of people came in the U.S. and, you know, they were enjoying themselves. And then the last few months, it's been very painful. So they're getting used to the volatility that those of us who've been involved for 10 or more years are. Well, I don't think you ever fully get used to it, but we tolerate it, you know.
So we already been through like the stress test already
Then, yeah,
for the last 3 months.
yeah, we have many times.
And then let me just ask another like angle in this question. Maybe it can be related to like Jito for me. So you are seeing staking ETFs begin to gain regulatory approval in the US, and then do you think liquid staking tokens could also become part of the ETF universe as well?
Yeah, so liquid staking token, I think you mentioned at the beginning, is obviously a token that represents a staked position. One of the challenges we have as an issuer of staking ETFs is that if we stake the full amount of tokens that are in the fund and then we have a redemption request from the market, we have to honor that. But that means we have to unbond the staking. And different protocols require different time periods and different rules. And so liquid staking tokens can offer a liquid alternative for a fund manager like us. Unfortunately, you know, they're still on the cutting edge, right? So liquid staking tokens are very new. And I think the regulators they're open. They allowed us to do it. We're the first in the United States to put liquid staking tokens into our fund, and it was yours. But they have a very small limit on what we can do. I do think that will change over time, and especially as the liquid staking token universe becomes perhaps more regulated and more defined, especially by the Clarity Act in the U.S. Whenever that gets put through in whatever form it finally takes.
So yeah, we are talking to many institutions already, like including Korea, and then we are getting pretty like positive feedback regarding the idea because we said like through the ETF, the retail investor can reduce their headache just dealing with the custody or operation or staking, but actually just headache just went to institutions or ETF issuers now. And then if you use like LST or like for example like Jitoso, like in LST, like every kind of custody or staking or operations are all embedded in the token as a kind of total like return asset. So we just like take care of those kind of headache even for ETFs issuers as well. And that's why I think like the many institutions would like to just collaborate with the Jito as well.
Yeah, it's sort of like a total return vehicle that we can utilize for liquidity.
So actually, it took a lot of years, like many years, until we see the first Bitcoin spot ETF listed in the U.S. And then it took another like almost 2 years to see the first Solana staking ETF in the U.S. And then so it takes time. And then what is the biggest regulatory like bottleneck for altcoin ETF in the U.S. today? It can be like tax consideration or just security reason or like protecting customer. What's the kind of main topic like discussed nowadays?
Well, there's actually a regime in the U.S. for launching altcoin ETFs now. I'd say there's a combination of factors that are, when you say a bottleneck, I mean, first of all, there's not a huge universe of altcoin ETFs or altcoins that are large enough to justify their own ETF. We struggle with this. We have a lot of foundations that we're talking to, and you know, everybody wants. Well, most people want an ETF launched on their token. It's not always the right time, but then we still have all the people to convince. You know, the market makers, the custodians, and then you do need to do a security analysis because If you remember back a few years, if you were tracking the space, the big debate was on any particular token, is this a commodity or is this a security? And in the US, the regulations are quite different for one versus the other. Bitcoin, of course, was accepted as a commodity, Ethereum pretty much, and then it starts to get fuzzy, which is why we have a piece of proposed law in front of the US legislator called the Clarity Act, because we need clarity on these issues. So absent that determination, we issuers have had to do our own analysis and look at a token and examine whether, in our opinion and in our legal team's opinion, whether this token is a security or not, right? And so that is something that you run into as you get further down the chain with altcoins, where some are very unclear in terms of whether they would be deemed a security or a commodity. And so we have to be careful there because that changes how we build the fund.
And then like one related question just popped up in my mind that, so like individual altcoin has very not meaningful market cap in this size. So actually like Ethereum has about 240 billion in market cap, and then Solana has about 50 billion. And then it's not that large. And then of course like the other altcoins has only about 100 million or even less. And so in that case, can you think about just making it kind of like basket of altcoin, just create a kind of product?
A basket of altcoins.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I don't think. So we still need to start with the like S&P 500 of or maybe the Dow Jones 30 or even less before we get down into the deep depths of the altcoin market. Yeah, maybe it'll get there, but we're actually focused on something that's more top 5, top 10, top 20, and then beyond that, we'll see how the space develops.
So we are almost out of time. So let me try this wrap this up. So thank you, Greg, for your like great insight and then like help us to thinking through these issues regarding Altcoin ETF. And then thank for you all for joining the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.